tremendous crowd on hand.
And almost everyone here had shoes on.
Well, the last time I covered WCW in 1994, things were in a real upturn for the company. Hulk Hogan had just made his in-ring debut, wrestling Ric Flair for the title at Bash at the Beach, and that show did boffo numbers. Record number of pay-per-view buys set for that show, wouldn't be beat for almost 2 years after that point. And so, needless to say, in the short term at least, Hogan was a positive for WCW. But what happens at the next pay-per-view when the champion is not wrestling that night? We're going to find out when we look at WCW Fall Brawl 94 War Games from September 18th at the Roanoke Civic Center in Roanoke, Virginia. This show was nominated by Christopher Picorni over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret. The opening hype package definitely has video game vibes about it, but it seems pretty dire. I mean, this pilot got hit by a missile, he's about to crash out, and now we're seeing Lord Steven Regal and Pretty Wonderful on the radar? Come on, priorities! 6,500 folks are in the building. The show gets 115,000 pay-per-view buys. That is up significantly from 95,000 the previous year. However, it is down huge from Bash at the Beach just a few months earlier when that one did like over 200,000 views. So if you want to make the argument that Hulk Hogan brings in buy rates at the time, comparing that show to this one where he's not wrestling, and neither is Flair for that matter, it's pretty telling. Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan are on the call. Mean Gene Okerlund's there too. Also, I mentioned this in my SummerSlam 1990 review, and I think it's just as applicable here. Jesse Ventura, he gone! They explain that the world champion Hulk Hogan and the recently suspended Ric Flair will both be on the show tonight live via satellite. Woohoo! They also give an injury update on the US champion Ricky Steamboat and says there may be some alternate plans in line for stunning Steve Austin and the US championship match he's supposed to be in. With that out of the way though, let's get to the first match. And hey, like I've said before, it's not a mid-90s WCW pay-per-view. If this man ain't opening up the show, it's Johnny B. Bad challenging Lord Steven Regal once again for the World TV title. These guys had a match at Bash at the Beach that was pretty great, but Regal's had enough of Bad's antics, and in a rare form, the champion actually demands a match from Johnny B. Bad here. And you could tell Regal is taking this very seriously because he's got, I guess you could call this the equivalent of his WrestleMania entrance attire here. What in God's name is he wearing? That coat, that powdered wig, did he lose a bet or something? There's no explanation given other than it's English heritage. And Heenan says if Zsa Zsa Gabor had a wig like that, she'd be making movies today. Regal looks absolutely disgusted, and I can't tell if it's over Johnny B. Bad or his outfit. Was the polo getup not silly enough? Bad seems to be out wrestling the technician in the early going. Heenan on commentary saying there have been more moves in the first 5 minutes of this match than at the Michael Jackson honeymoon. Bad even gets an airplane spin. Regal powders, but Johnny dives after him, goes for a crossbody, but falls into the ropes instead. That gives Regal the opening, gets very aggressive. Sir William on the outside helping out. There's that man again. It's Barry Darsow as the Blacktop Bully. He's just been showing up at events in the crowd every week, shouting at various wrestlers. Doesn't seem to have one particular target. He just kind of yells at everybody. Johnny fights up out of a hold, but Regal flattens him again with an uppercut. We get a reverse atomic drop. Great sell by Regal there as Johnny starts mounting his big comeback, hits the flying head scissors. William tries to assist Regal a couple of times. It backfires each time. Johnny blocks an uppercut and counters into the backslide, gets the 3 count, and wins his first World TV title. I give it 3 stars out of 5. You know, I don't think it's quite as good as their match at Bash at the Beach, but not by much, and it's still a really good opening matchup. I think the wrestling is solid, and the character work by both guys is great. It's a classic story, that constantly cheating heel finally getting his comeuppance. I think it's just really well done. How often do you see a match end on a backslide? It's even more fitting and more it's a more glorious moment when you realize that it's like this mat technician who gets beat on a move like that. And I think that's pretty neat the way they did it. And yeah, Johnny B. Bad, first of 2 World TV titles he's going to win in his career. We get a recap of Clash of the Champions in August when Vacant, apparently, struck Hulk Hogan from behind with a lead pipe and laid him out, barely came back from the hospital in time to defend the title against Flair in the main event, and Hogan ultimately lost via countout. Flair has been suspended for being a baddie, but is now walking around Las Vegas with this phony World Championship belt. It's actually known as the Vegas World Championship because the only 2 times you ever saw it on television was when Ric Flair was in Las Vegas. Mean Gene talks about how he was on G. Gordon Liddy's show this past week, and they both agreed that Bobby Heenan had something to do with the assault on Hogan. That sounds like a real conversation. On to our next match, loser leaves WCW as Nivek takes on Kevin Sullivan takes on Cactus Jack. Cactus and Kevin, an unlikely pairing. They became tag team champions earlier in the year, beating the Nasty Boys. Then at Bash at the Beach, they lost the belts to the Pretty Pauls, Roma and Orndorff. And now Kevin wants nothing to do with Cactus. And by the way, Dave's character is that he is very dyslexic, so he calls everyone by their names in reverse. So Kevin is Nivek, he is Evad, and Cactus is Sustak. I like that even made onto one of the graphics for Saturday night when they were hyping a Cactus Jack Kevin Sullivan matchup as well. Great promos by these guys in the build, by the way. Cactus brings up how he lost his ear in Munich, how he put off surgery in order to win the tag titles with Sullivan at Slamboree, but now after losing them to Pretty Wonderful, the relationship has soured. They're already fighting in the crowd as the match begins, as Bathrobe Evad looks on in the background. Sustak tries to go for a mule kick, but he hits the bottom rope instead. Back on the outside, Sustak peels off the padding, wants to go off the second rope, but Evad stops him. Nivek pulls Sustak off and splats him onto the concrete. Friggin' ouch. Sullivan starts to attack Sustak's wounded ear. I'm pretty sure I heard Sustak make a swear. Jack starts fighting back, goes for a pile driver on the floor, and takes his third bump on the concrete so far. Make that fourth. Sustak Jack still on the attack. He grabs a chair, but Evad stops him from using it, feels conflicted about it. Nivek grabs another chair from the front row, but Evad stops him as well. Sustak nails Evad on accident. Nivek with the cover, and Sustak loses and must leave CWC. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. This was just a straight up brawl, and these two were beating the hell out of each other in this one. I mean, none more so than Cactus Jack beating himself up, because some of those concrete bumps he took were absolutely brutal looking. Just makes his matches around this time feel a lot more visceral when you're watching it. Mick Foley was having a lot of creative differences with WCW at this time, a lot of frustrations and disagreements with Eric Bischoff over his direction. In his book, he talks about how he felt the fact that they really dropped the ball in doing anything significant with he and Vader after some of the wars they'd been in, and already kind of had one foot out the door at this point, and so this was the way they wrote him off, and he was gone from WCW after this. He would go on to continue to build his name and seek his fortune in Japan and ECW in the years after this, and then in 1996 it's the beginning of the Mankind era in the WWF. The notorious MGO is backstage with the Stud Stable. Colonel Robert Parker with Terry Funk, Buckhouse Buck, Arn Anderson, and the man called Ming. Buck says that the Colonel doesn't belong in the match. Parker says, though, if he has to, he'll get in there and go in proud and will definitely not shit his pants. I want to fight the fat men first, Colonel. Arn says the time for hype is over. The time has come to reach into a man's very manhood and pull something out of him that makes him say, I quit. He says we came here to die tonight if necessary, because you'll have to kill us to beat us. Great promo by these guys. Up next, the scheduled match is supposed to be for the United States Championship as Ricky Steamboat defends against Stunning Steve Austin. These two have had a great rivalry so far in 1994. They had a terrific match at Bash at the Beach, another great rematch at the Clash of the Champions in August, but shortly after that, Ricky Steamboat suffers a career-ending back injury and is forced to relinquish the championship. All aboard the SS Austin. The former champ and the #1 contender enters the ring first. Out comes the champ in his street clothes holding the belt. WCW President Nick Bockwinkel announces that Steamboat, since he can't compete and can't defend the belt, the title must be handed back to Steve Austin, who is elated. Steamboat reminding Austin that Steve never actually beat him for the belt. Austin calls him a mealy-mouthed Hawaiian punk and says, hell of a match. Steve goes to leave, but the Box says he's defending that championship tonight. Austin is protesting, but it's time to bring out his opponent, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, making his WCW pay-per-view debut. We'd seen him on TV for maybe a week or so before this. The match begins. Austin is beside himself. He tries to leave, but Bockwinkel pulls him back into the ring. Duggan, with the most devastating back body drop in history, covers to win and is the new U.S. champion, just like that. Duggan talks to Mean Gene after the match, calls it the greatest night of his life, very proud to hold the belt, God bless America. He also puts over his friend Hulk Hogan and says, oh, Ric Flair, look out for the Hulkster, tough guy. The crowd did not care for that part. This is a 0-star match, obviously. Now, on the one hand, I can see WCW's thinking in the way they did this because, hey, that's switcheroo, it's a big surprise, and the fans clearly dug it. I mean, that was a huge reaction when it happened, so on that level, it clearly worked. But even if you don't take into account what's going to happen with Steve Austin in 4 years and how WCW dropped the ball with him, this still feels like a bit of a misfire. And there's definitely a trend across this show of like the older veteran wrestlers getting wins over like the younger, more up-and-coming talent, or the ones that may deserve better shots or aren't being used very well creatively. That is definitely a theme throughout this show at times. But be that as it may, I think that Steamboat, it really sucks that his career ended the way it did, and it's really disappointing we didn't get this match, and who knows what other great matches we could have had if Steamboat remained healthy and was able to keep wrestling to his natural conclusion in retirement. Because, he would wrestle again about a decade later, a handful of matches with Chris Jericho, but yeah, this was it. And so really shitty way for such a great wrestler like Steamboat to go out. But I think this moment here of him handing off the belt to Austin and the trade, everything, it worked on a crowd level. The crowd was bummed that Steamboat was hurt, and then they were elated again once Duggan won. So again, on that level, it certainly worked. We go from one patriotic gimmick to the next as Marcus Bagwell and the Patriot Stars and Stripes make their way into the ring to challenge Pretty Wonderful for the WCW tag titles. Man, so much Sousa on this show. Don't tell Yokozuna. S&S even get their own patriotic color scheme for their name key. Hacksaw didn't even get a lower third. There's that man again. He finally gets ejected after putting hands on the challengers. Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff. The look of the big glittery robe and jacket with the big ass shades is certainly a choice. Roma says into the camera, "I'm coming after you, Piscatelli." Who is he talking to? Is he calling out Tino Sabatelli when he's 11? We get a lot of shtick and gaga early on. Bagwell gets a Paula chant started, to which the baddies are incensed. Roma gets the first shots in. I love the way Buff hits this crossbody. Patriot and Bagwell get one over on the champs for a while, but Orndorff grabs Bagwell while the referee's distracted. The Pauls take over. Orndorff with the moves. Heenan on commentary implying that the last name Bagwell means that Marcus's family are just like bums and bag people living in dumpsters, which I think is a funny connection to make. Roma with a huge dropkick to Marcus and a big top rope elbow drop, but takes too much time before the cover. Orndorff with a sneaky illegal ejection on Bagwell right into Heenan's drink cooler. Roma doing laps as Orndorff takes the cooler and dumps ice all over Buff, but Bagwell grabs a water bottle. Is he gonna hit him with, oh no, never mind, he dropped it. Buff goes to make the hot tag. The referee misses it, but the Patriot gets in there. He is all over the Pauls, and the referee does nothing except point and scold. Meanwhile, Bagwell taking a pile driver on the floor. Who's the ref here, Randy Anderson or Rick Knox? Bagwell's thrown back in. Roma makes the cover, and the champs retain. I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. It started kind of slow, but then things picked up. I love the athleticism of Paul Roma. I love the babyface fire in Marcus Bagwell in this matchup here. And the finish was a bit silly just because the length of time the Patriot was the illegal man and the referee did nothing about it. But the rest of the match is pretty solid. Mean Gene is backstage with Dusty and Dustin Rhodes and the Nasty Boys. Jerry Sags telling the stud stable to eat some cage. Brian Knobbs saying it's retribution time. Dustin Rhodes telling Arn that he ain't no man. Dusty now talking about the great games, goodwill, Olympics, baseball games, football games, war games. Athai means games. He name drops Cody Garrett and Margaret Teal in his promo, says Colonel Parker's gonna squeal like a pig, and then he wraps it all up by quoting Woody Harrelson apparently and saying, "You ain't seen nothing yet." But like, can that line really be attributed to him? Up next, a triangle match to determine the #1 contender for the WCW Championship. It's Sting, the Guardian Angel, and Vader. The match was originally supposed to have Ric Flair in there. It was announced, and then his kayfabe suspension happened, so he was taken out of the match, and Guardian Angel was put in. Now, Angel and Sting each have a violent history with Vader, so it will be interesting to see what kind of combinations we'll get here. It's basically a very short gauntlet match. A coin flip will determine the first two competitors. They have a match, one fall, 15-minute time limit. Then after that match, the next man comes in. My first thought though is, what in the face-painted fuck is this network dub of Man Called Sting? It's terrible. After the coin flip, Sting is the odd man out, so we begin with Vader and Guardian Angel. Vader makes some noises, Angel makes some noises back.
We'll lose. fights that he is never going to lose.
Vader hits Angel in what Heenan calls the prune Danish, trading hard strikes, Angel managing to get the big man up for a slam, similar to what happened at Bash at the Beach, tries again but can't pull it off. Angel goes up top for a flying nothing, guillotines himself on the top rope. Angel takes down Vader a couple of times, both men tumble out of the ring. On the outside, Harley Race tries to help but eats a fist from Vader. Big man Enziguri back in the ring. The big man gets the bigger man up for another body slam. Angel with the Irish whip, Vader just lays out the referee. We get the Patrick flop. Angel hits the Guardian slam, but Race gets in there with the cheap headbutt. We get the Vader bomb, and the Mastodon wins the first round. I'm just going to give this one star out of 5. Sting has re-entered the arena now. We get this face-off. Nick Patrick seems to be fine after that Vader clothesline. Vader showing off the strength. Sting is unfazed, and his opponent seems to be taken aback a bit. Sting fires up for a second. We get this little miscommunication before they get it again. Sting just running into a brick wall here. Vader hits his bomb, but the big man takes an awful lot of time afterward. Goes for it again, but it's stopped. Vader tries one more time, but misses it. Sting starts to come back. On the outside, Harley gets physical again, but Sting suplexes him onto the floor, and Tony Schiavone goes, "He saved our life!" Sting with a vertical on Vader in the ring, who's lost his mask again. Vader comes back, goes for the moonsault, but gets none of it. Sting is on a roll, hits his splash, then a god-dang German suplex on Vader, but still a kick out. Vader still in this thing, throwing those big punches. Harley Race continues to stir it up outside. They spell Sting H-E-A-R-T as the Stinger makes his big comeback at the 11-minute mark. The action has now moved into the second ring. Sting with 2 top rope clotheslines and a splash, still not enough to beat him. With 1 minute remaining, Sting intercepts Vader, slams them down, tries to get the Scorpion Deathlock on, but cannot do it. As the 15 minutes expires, we go into a 5-minute overtime. On the top rope, Sting fights back, even biting Vader in the face. Now Vader's up top again. Sting gets up and hucks him down to the mat. More back and forth as the clock winds down. Vader hits his powerbomb. There's a bit of a timing and communication issue in this one. I mean, everything like the powerbomb and the count by the referee is timed perfectly with Gary Michael Capetta's countdown that he's doing on the house mic, but Gary doesn't say like 0, the bell doesn't ring right away when the clock hits 0, and so there's just this like time where Nick Patrick has to pull his 3 count and say, no, he kicked out, and then the bell finally rings. So it kind of feels like a bit of a cluster there at the end, but either way, now we enter sudden death, which means the first wrestler knocked off of his feet is going to lose. Vader throws hands, Sting wobbling around, barely hanging on as the crowd gets loud as he fights back. Harley Race gets involved again, but the Guardian Angel shows up and stops him. Where the hell's he been this whole time? Some Guardian. The ref is busy with them as Sting finally knocks Vader down. The crowd is electric for it, but there's no referee. The Masked Man shows up and hits Sting. You can even see him getting chased out by some fans. That's smart of them to go after the guy with the tire iron. Sting is down as the referee comes back and sees him. Vader is won and is the new #1 contender. I give this portion of the triangle match 3.5 stars out of 5. Now, I'm going to be transparent here and say the first time that I watched this match back, I hated it. I did not like it. I was really combining both of those matches into one segment, and so that was going to bring my overall rating down. But also, I just didn't like the pacing in Sting and Vader at the time. I didn't like the booking of the match. I thought it would have made more sense for Vader to be the one who comes in second, so Sting has more of a come-from-behind battle and is better protected when he loses. But I think that, maybe I was just tired, not really feeling it, because then when I'm going back and like doing more research about the show, before I'm recording, it's like, man, like people are talking a lot more nice about this match than I was thinking. Am I watching a different match? So I decided just kind of like after sleeping on it, I decided to watch the match again. And yeah, like it was a much better time. Like it was definitely a great back and forth, a little slow. And I still maintain that the order of people coming out could have been different. Oh, this goes a long way toward building Vader as a real monster toward the #1 contendership as well. So that's kind of a nitpick. And I'm glad I watched this match back because I have a greater appreciation for it than I did the first time I watched it. Mean Gene Okerlund on the stage to welcome Hulk Hogan live via satellite, quote unquote. This blatantly pre-taped segment is getting booed by the live crowd as he explains his master plan to get Ric Flair back in the ring. We then get this split screen exchange as Hogan and Flair are having a phone call. Hogan's in Florida, Flair is in Vegas with some ladies. Hogan reiterates that he's got the master plan, but Flair says he does not want to go back into the business now that he's suspended / retired and is the real world's champion. Where have we seen this angle with Flair before? Hogan makes an offer. One more match for the championship, and if Flair wins, Hogan will retire from wrestling. The idea is very enticing to the Nature Boy, who accepts the challenge. Hogan hangs up, tells Jimmy Hart that he suckered Flair in, brother, and reveals that the knee is getting stronger. That was actually not a bad segment, because if we were to assume that those guys like recorded and did that phone call like live and did it at the same time, that's, to do a promo off with each other when you're over the phone and not able to see each other, that's pretty impressive for both guys here. Even though, like, don't try and sell it as live via satellite, because you could just obviously tell it wasn't. Maybe a little long for pay-per-view. This feels like a good TV segment, but maybe not on the pay-per-view itself. So after we get this live via satellite segment here, Gino brings out the Bach and asks, what do you make of all this? Bachwinkle is just one step ahead and basically, oh yeah, we've already got this thing settled. The match is going to happen next month at Halloween Havoc, and it's going to be in a steel cage. And Gene goes, what are you smoking? Great news for the Halloween Havoc crowd, but not for the live crowd here. Michael Buffer makes our introductions for the main event. It's War Games as the Stud Stable take on the Rhodeses and the Nasty Boys. Dustin Rhodes has been beaten down time and time again by Colonel Parker's Stud Stable. Back at Bash at the Beach, he tried recruiting Arn Anderson to join forces, but Arn turned on him and joined the Studs. We got that emotional reunion with Dusty and Dustin with the View Never Changes promo. It's one of Dusty's really greatest promos he ever did, saying, I neglected you as a father while I was pursuing my fame and fortune. Says the view never changes. He tells his son not to go looking for another tag team partner, to pick him as his partner. He says the Kennedys are blood, the Earth are blood, the Rhodes are blood. I need a hug and a kiss to seal the deal, daddy. It's just a fantastic promo. At Clash of the Champions, the Rhodeses teamed up to take on the Stud Stable. Dusty recreating this moment he had with Big Bubba Rogers a decade earlier, where he breaks a chair over Ming's head. He no-sells it and puts the nerve hold on the American Dream. Then on an episode of Saturday Night, Dusty went to a scrap bar to find the Nasty Boys and recruit them into his team. And a fun little fact here, 3 of the 4 men in the babyface team are related, because Jerry Sags at one point was Dusty's brother-in-law. The man called Ming was meant to be the 4th man on the Stud Stable, but for reasons, WCW's decided to put Colonel Parker in as the 4th instead, and Parker's like, oh, my heart, oh, I need my kerchief, oh, someone get me a diaper. Can I just say, hot damn, I love the Stud Stable theme in WCW. I sing it to myself like constantly throughout the day. I'll just be kind of going about my business and going ding 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 ding. It's amazing. Tony on commentary saying, ironic that last night a woman from this town became the first runner-up in Miss America, and tonight we're going to war. I'm not sure if that's irony or not, Tony, but it's something, I guess. It all begins with Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson. We immediately get a nice shot of Dustin's taint as he climbs over Jackie Crockett. Dustin literally jackhammering Arn's head and shoulders between the 2 ring aprons. 5 minutes have elapsed. We get the coin flip, and what a shock. The heels have the advantage. In comes Buckhouse Bunk. Bobby Heenan has to have the rules explained to him like every 5 seconds in this match. Like, so can he quit now? Does the other guy have to leave the ring? Double teaming on Dustin. We get a double Boston Crab from the baddies. 2 minutes pass. In comes Jerry Sags to even the odds. He just slams Buck into the wall of the cage with some force. Every time I see any move that involves picking a guy up over his head, I'm always terrified we're going to get another Sid and Brian Pillman moment. Terry Funk is the next man in. I've changed the rules. My boots go on my hands now. Jesus, look at that pile driver by Sags to Funk in between the rings, and Funk slips down into the abyss. That's incredible. Brian Knobbs of the Nasty Boys enters the ring and fights off all 3 men. Strongest this man's ever looked. Now Sags using Terry's own boot as a weapon. Finally, it's Colonel Parker's turn to enter, who winds up hurting his own hand simply punching Dustin. Funk and Dustin trading shots with one leather belt, Parker getting some shots in with a belt of his own. Huge Dusty chant as the clock winds down and the American Dream enters his final War Games match. The match beyond has officially begun. Meng is tearing at the cage walls. Colonel Parker is now the victim of a 3-on-1 beatdown. The figure 4 by Dusty onto Parker, multiple elbow drops and splashes by the Nasties at the same time. Parker literally shitting his white pants as this is all going down. Finally, Parker submits and the match is over. Meng gets in the ring finally and headbutts the camera lens. He's so upset that it wasn't him shitting his pants. I give it 3 stars out of 5. This was by no means the best or the bloodiest War Games match in history. Might have been the shittiest, Waka Waka, but it was still very entertaining nonetheless. And even though like the match portion, the official part when all 8 guys are in the ring, was very short, like Dusty comes in, boom, 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 match is over. But the story, the whole arc that they took us on from, Dustin being betrayed by Arn Anderson and Dusty coming back and reuniting with his estranged son and having these wars together and ending here at War Games, I thought was just really well done. This is a great culmination of what has been a very strong emotional storyline. And so in that sense, this was a terrific War Games match. My grade for Fall Brawl 1994 is a B-. No Hogan, no Flair, and no Steamboat. That means that the rest of the roster really needs to step up to make it work. And I think the talent did that. I think not quite as strong a show as Bash at the Beach, but still a lot of great stories told across the show, a lot of really satisfying conclusions to some stories that we saw begin at Bash at the Beach. And, the main event, even though, again, it wasn't the greatest, most spectacular War Games match of all time, but it really was a great exclamation point on a very long and very well done story. So I think there's a little bit of everything on this show. You've got your comedy with some Bobby Heenan lines on commentary. You've got some high-flying action with Johnny B. Bad. You've got, your brawls with Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan and Vader being involved. Vader and Sting was a great return for them. And just, pretty darn solid show all told. But what did you think of Fall Brawl 94? And how about this review? Let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for all the notifications. Now in 2 weeks, we return to WCW. We return to the Fall Brawl tradition of War Games, but now it's 1998. The NWO is still large and in charge, and there are now 2 groups of WCW wrestlers trying to take them down. But what happens when the Ultimate Warrior gets involved? We're going to find out with Fall Brawl 1998. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.